What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Ocali Sports Update. I'm Editor-in-Chief Ryan Novozinsky, joined here by Sports Editor Sudeep Tumma. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the OSU football team and what they've been doing all offseason and sort of giving you a preview on what's going to happen in 2 weeks when the OSU Cowboys play against the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. So Sudeep, let's talk a little bit about the offense real quick. I know there were some interesting storylines with the offensive line, obviously, and how do you think that's going to shape up this year?
Yeah, I think that's at the core of it, because when you look at this team, you obviously bringing back Tyler and Chuba, right? You have this very explosive offense, and now you're bringing transfers as well, but the offense might just be the Achilles heel, right? That's where you have the biggest question marks for almost something you didn't expect, right? It wasn't like guys graduated or transferred out until recently, right? And now I think that's where the biggest storyline comes from. But I think with Charlie Dickey, this offensive line, and the way that Ryan Schneider and all the guys I've been talking about, it seems like they have people ready to step up. And I know we talked about this before, the impact of an offensive line coach, right? You have a guy like Charlie Dickey, that really helps because you can develop guys. It's all the chemistry, cohesion, bringing everything together the right way. So if all works out, Chuba Hubbard didn't just run for 2,094 yards because Chuba Hubbard is Chuba Hubbard, right? He is Chuba Hubbard, but also he had an offensive line that paved the way. So that will definitely be a key here.
It can't be understated just how important an offensive line is to a team, especially going into a season where, like you said, you have that running back that is such a key position to your team. Yeah. But I don't want to say it like this, but if it was just your 5 average college students out there, you wouldn't be able to have a 2,094-yard season like Chuba Hubbard had. My thing with the offensive line is, like you said, the offensive line coach is such an important thing. And it's adaptability. This is I'd say the most adaptive season that every single person, I don't care if it's Mike Gundy, I don't care if it's the Water Boys, they need to have the most adaptive season of their lives not because of COVID, not only because of all the interesting storylines going into the season, but because of these sort of micro storylines with each position group, right? Like you have 2 number 1 receivers essentially, in Dylan Stoner and Tylan Wallace, and how will the roles be balanced? If you want to talk offensive as a whole, you got a new offensive coordinator in there. You got to replace 2 starting, a guard and a tackle. You have to replace things like that, and these are such big storylines that I feel like have almost been, I don't want to say glossed over, but it's been weird because they've been happening every week, and there's some that you might not even think about, right? Like what will happen with Braden Johnson? Will he emerge? Will he emerge as one of those receivers that can put up a fight against Dylan Stoner and Tylan Wallace up there? What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's the thing. There's so many storylines, right? Starting with Casey Dunn. You bring in a new offensive mind, but a very talented one, right? This guy is a wide receiver savant, but I continue using that term. He knows exactly what he's doing. And obviously he hasn't been an offensive coordinator before, right? But you love what he's already brought. And then you have so many storylines, right? Whether it's Spencer Sanders' development, Chuba Hubbard in the running back depth, and the wide receivers. I think one of the craziest things that have been said was Dylan Stoner can win a Biletnikoff, right, by Spencer Sanders, which is pretty crazy when you think about how good Tylan Wallace is. And just Dylan Stoner, everyone knows he's already a very speedy, fast, great route runner, a great receiver overall, but he's also someone that's, I don't think, broken over 600 yards. And to think that guy is going to go win a Biletnikoff, I mean, that just speaks volumes from his quarterback that trusts him. I think Braden Johnson, Dylan Stoner, and Tylan Wallace, that kind of locks down your top 3. Likely, but you have guys like Winston Anderson, right? You have a D. Anderson. You have all these younger guys or transfers that could step up, and I think that speaks to the depth, which is always important. And with Casey Dunn, the wide receivers coach, being your offensive coordinator, that helps your entire wide receiver room.
Let's talk about transfers real quick. You touched on a little bit. I know that you got Tay Martin coming in. You got a couple other guys coming in. Let's talk about the transfers on the defensive side of the ball as well. I want to talk about Christian Holmes. I want to talk about that secondary. What do you expect out of this secondary this year? And maybe someone that can bolster it that's unlikely, that you might not think, Christian Holmes can come and set the world on fire. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, going into last year, even just the whole year, secondary was really considered the strength, right? And it was. With those 3 safeties, man, that's scary, especially with Colby and Trey Sterling, right? That's a top 10 duo right there.
Get them back, too.
Right, yeah, one of the best duos in the country, right? Yeah, you do get them back in all aspects, right? Whether it's stopping the run, in coverage, whatever it may be. You have great safeties, but the question before the offensive line was the question amongst this whole team was the cornerbacks, right? With Rodarius Williams, would he step up and take over that number 1 role and really flourish? Then your bigger question is, all right, what about the number 2 corner, right? Because Rodarius' experience, I think he's better than people understand. He's got good physical tools, big enough, and then it became this number 2 corner, right? They had to bring Jarek Bernard down because they need cornerback help.
Yeah.
Right? Then you bring in transfer Christian Holmes, who I think is better than a lot of people realize. You know, playing in the SEC, you got a lot of rushing, right? Guys don't always talk about those corners, but he looks like a guy who's really flourishing, and I think it was really telling that Mike Gundy, right, the guy who didn't let a single first-year player ever talk to the media, is letting Christian Holmes talk to us, right? And then I think you got a pretty good trio between Jarek Bernard, who played corner in high school, essentially was a cornerback. You know, he played that inside corner just about most plays, even though he was a third safety. And I think that secondary could again be a strength of this team.
I talked about adaptability before. I think you get that out of Jarek Bernard because he can almost switch positions, right? And he does. And you also get that in the linebacking core too with Malcolm Rodriguez, right? With Amen Ogbagamiga. And now you're also with another interesting tidbit to that is that you get a guy who uses all his physical intangibles. Was injured last season in Calvin Bundage back. You know, what are your thoughts on maybe how this linebacking core might shape up this year? I think we might see the same as last year because they did so well. Yeah. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, going into last year, we said the secondary was a strength, the linebacking core was a weakness, right? And not because they weren't right, and not because they weren't talented, but because you had so many injuries, right, from everywhere. And you went in not knowing what was going to happen. You had Malcolm Rodriguez, who was a converted safety, Amen, who didn't really play too much, and now those two guys, right, both 100+ tacklers, but the stat sheet does not do justice. Those two guys are really turning the corner into becoming elite. Amen's definitely playing on Sundays next year. You have let's take a second just to respect how good those two guys are, right? Versatile and impactful in just about every shape. And the fact that you're playing a 4-2-5 with only 2 linebackers and both those guys are such high quality is really helpful. Now, the depth, right? Devin Harper, excellent linebacker. Sure. Then after him, you have Calvin Bundage, right? You have those 4 guys. Obviously, on defense, in a passing league, you always want to be rotating your defenders, right? You don't want to have them play 100% or close to it. More depth gives you more versatility, right? But Calvin Bundage is a guy who Jim Knowles talked about as a pass rusher, right? Which is interesting because he was more than that, obviously. But the fact that he kind of alluded to just that, Trace Ford, and he said, I think his exact quote was Trace Ford and Calvin Bundage off the edge. Now, imagine that guy who was, you know, a star for this team before the injury, just coming off the edge, playing a situational pass rush role. This is me speculating, but that would be exciting. And I think that would be helpful behind those 2 linebackers.
And it's great when you can add that with the gap responsibility that the defensive line, that this experience. I need you to note that real quick. Experienced defensive line coming into this season. Last season, it was all about, OSU doesn't have experience and depth in the defensive line, and they didn't at the time, of course. But now you got Cam Murray in his senior year. Now you got Israel Antwine, somebody that I think is going to emerge as probably one of the best defensive linemen in the league this season. And then you also have, you got your Trace Ford on the edge, and then if you have Calvin Bundage as an edge pass rusher now, that would be such an astounding thing for him. And I think he has the strength, I think he has the speed and the athleticism to do that and sort of to adapt and have that speed off the edge. And I think that'd be a really great thing.
And overall, this D-line is obviously talented, right? With the Trace Ford, Cameron Murray, Israel Antwine. I don't know how many times I stress this to you. I love Israel.
You do, yeah.
I think he's excellent. He wasn't really highlighted, right? A lot of times defensive tackles are not highlighted simply because they are defensive tackles, right? They play a different role. Sometimes it's just
job is to not be pushed.
Right. Their job is just not to be pushed, to hold a gap and let your other guys come in who end up showing on the stat sheet. But this is the real strength of this team, or the real strength of this D-line is the depth, right? And if there's one position on the entire team where I want depth, it's on D-line, right? Because D-line is where you want to constantly rotate guys, because I think the best example I can always think of is the Philadelphia Eagles, right? The years where they had one of the best front 7 in the NFL, they didn't just have the most talented front 7 starters, they had really good depth, because being a defensive lineman is tough, right? It's exhausting, and you can be really good, but you also need that time to jump off the field, to rotate in and out, especially, again, in a passing league where there's so many snaps going on, right, in the Big 12. And I think having that depth is going to be absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see it all unfold this season. And with that goes... there's almost a domino effect in this OSU defense, and with any good defense, right? And that's a good thing, because once you have those defensive tackles, defensive linemen that mind their gaps, that have gap responsibility, you have those linebackers crash into those gaps and sort of get the stats, right? It's almost like a thing of, the lineman on both sides really is not the sexy position that people say, and it's not the one that people look out for, right? But it is such an important thing, and it's a sign of a great defense to have that depth, to have all these dominoes fall into place, so that when the linebackers play better, the secondary can also play better. And that's the holistic view, I think, of this OSU team as a whole.
Yeah, and I don't think this gets talked about enough in football. Cornerbacks and pass rushers go hand in hand. Right? Like, you can have the best secondary in the NFL, but you need those guys, those wide receivers eventually get open, right? Whether it's on a route or they just go run backyard football, they're eventually going to get open. Pass rushers and cornerbacks go hand in hand, where you might have an average secondary, but pass rushing that gets the quarterback in a second, those cornerbacks are going to hold for like a second or so. And having improved pass rush, because when you look at this team last year, I think Amen was the only person who was the person who led this team with 5.5 sacks. There was pass rush coming from here and there, right? But to have a really true star pass rusher emerge, whether it be Calvin Bundage, Trace Ford, whoever, I think will be important to really bolster the secondary as well. More than just, we need a second cornerback or we need Rodarius to step up. You know what I'm saying? That pass rushing works hand in hand.
And I'll say this as a last note. It also particularly helps when you got a guy like Trace Ford who can also go back in pass coverage, especially, right?
Yeah, and let's not gloss over that. Trace Ford, I think, is going to have a huge breakout season because, first of all, he is huge, right? 6'2", 240, 248. That's strength, but to have athleticism the way he does, where I can't even quantify the number, like he can chase down guys, he can chase down running backs, quarterbacks, and when you see him run, he's big, but he runs like a cornerback, like a speedy cornerback. And to have that sort of versatility where in playing the Leo position, right, defensive end linebacker, he lines up on your defensive end, your inside linebacker position, outside linebacker position, and slot corner. Sometimes all in the same play.
Yeah.
Right? Where you see him constantly hovering around from over there to there to there.
There was an instance on against Tulsa in the second quarter where it literally was at the same play.
Exactly. And he's constantly rotating. And it's like in the end where he might start a slot corner, go to linebacker, then be inside of the defensive tackle, like right above his Cameron Murray. And you just don't know where he's coming from. And even when he's one place, he could just drop down to somewhere else. He gives you premium versatility. He's got all the physical tools. He's getting better and better. And, this is the year where I think he steps up. And I think that's also telling, where he was really good as a freshman, right? For Mike Gundy, again. Mike Gundy doesn't let us talk to first-year players. And Mike Gundy doesn't use a lot of freshmen, right? That's been well noted. But for him to make a serious impact from Tulsa, that was one of the first few games. The fact that we noticed him being there on the field from that game onward is already telling. And he got better throughout the season. He's going to continue to get better. Man, I think he's going to be in for a huge season.
They can do it all on the OSU team this year, guys. So thank you for joining us here on the Ocali Sports Update. For Ryan Novozinsky and Sudeep Tumma, have a great day. Thank you for listening in.